The only way to organize your folders in Obsidian is your way. But I think I know the best way to get there because I've helped thousands of others get there too. And it starts in a really unusual way, with no folders at all. Then we build from the bottom up, earning structure every step of the way. The reason this works is because it's based on what you need, not what somebody else needs or what somebody else told you online in a YouTube video like this, exactly what folders you need. No, we're going to build your folders from the bottom up. I have a series of different examples with a bunch of different notes, and we're going to look at how we might organize this, and we're going to do it together. And as we do, you might say to yourself, I don't even do that. I don't even take daily notes. So guess what? You won't need that type of folder. So please allow this video to act as your guide. I'm going to guide you through the process that hopefully will remove so much confusion around folders. Which folders do you need? Which folders do you need today? Which folders might you need in the future? And the one I like the best, which folders do you just not need at all? This video is kind of long, but it's long for a reason, because we want to build up the experience of going from no notes at all to thousands of notes, and the decisions that you would need to make along the way when it comes to folders. We have tons of examples. It took a lot of time to set up. If you go through in order, we will build with you every step of the way, and you'll know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. But if you're feeling antsy, feel free to jump ahead to whatever section works best for you. Okay, quick note before we dig in. I don't like wasting time thinking about folders when I could be thinking about linking my thinking and making amazing connections and relationships between ideas. But that being said, this video, it's about folders. So if you don't want to spend time with folders, this isn't the video for you. But if you want to actually have a holistic and comprehensive understanding of how we want to approach folders, this is the place to be. Also, I'm quite aware that there are a few people out there who think we don't need any folders at all. Hey, that's fine for what you're doing, but there are a lot of us that are doing things that actually do require folders in unique ways. And whether that's obvious or not so obvious, that's part of our pursuit in today's video. So without further ado, let's hop in. Okay, we are in. What you can see on my screen is a cascading series of Obsidian vaults. We're going to go through each of these. This is a guided process. I'm really happy to go through this with you. It took a lot of setup because it's really hard to talk about all the different phases when it comes to taking and making notes over time. I've done the hard work, and this was some hard work. Let's kind of hop into this together though and really zoom out. How do we start? We have a need. We have a need to hold on to a thought, a memory, an idea. And we're worried. We're worried we're going to lose that idea if we don't capture it in some way. So we turn to paper and we capture ideas, thoughts, we jot them down. And we turn to digital tools like Obsidian to help us hold on to these things. Let's keep in mind, our minds can only hold on to 5 items, give or take, at any given time. That is woefully inadequate for all the needs that we have in life. So we need to be able to extend our minds onto paper and onto digital paper, or an Ideaverse of your own notes. So how does this normally start? Let's start with the most basic. We have just opened up the first vault. This is note system 0, and 0 is for how many notes I've added. The only note in here is the welcome note that Obsidian adds for you. So this is how a new vault looks. Let's quickly say though, we have to go to the grocery store. We have to pick up food. I think this is something that most of us can relate to at some time in our lives, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times a day even. We need to eat, but we can't always remember when we go to that place all the things we need to get. So in Note System 2, we create a grocery list. We're going to take this thing with us. And now we can reference it when we're actually at the grocery store. This is how it starts. It starts so simple and then it gets so complex if we let it. But there are ways to deal with the complexity, and that's what we're going to cover with how to add folders only when they're needed. So here's another thing. It's not just the grocery list. I was also reading this book and I came across a cool concept. I have to ask you, have you ever done this? Have you ever read a nonfiction book and thought, whoa, that can really impact my life. That can change what I do for the better. I want to remember that. I want to hold on to that and be able to recall it at the right time whenever I need it. If so, Then we create a note. So here's one. I created a new note. I gave it a long title, a cool concept I heard while reading something. And in this case, it's the concept anti-fragility. A really interesting concept. We're not going to spend time on it now, but the point was I wanted to make sure I didn't forget this thing. I wanted to have a way to remember it. So I captured that note as well. Now here's a question for you. I have 2 notes. Should I start making 10 different folders? That would be ridiculous, right? We'd have more folders than notes. That makes no sense at all. So instead, we're going to create more notes. And that takes us to vault number 3, note system 22. So now we have 22 notes. You can see me scrolling through them as we speak. Now it's getting to the point where we're feeling a little bit of tension, a little bit of anxiety if we can find the right note at the right time. Now this is just 22 notes, but imagine it was 200 notes. You would really feel that anxiety. Imagine it was 2,000 notes. You would start to think, well, now it's going to take me even more time to find the thing I'm looking for. That's not a good feeling. And instead, I think I might just go on YouTube or something just to avoid that micro pain of trying to remember where I put the thing. And that's where folders and links and other things can help. This video is all about folders though. So this is the point where with these 22 notes, let's look at them together. We have things on concepts, journal entries, projects, quotes, simmering efforts, notes from class, daily notes, and more. Now, how might we organize these things? I know what you're thinking. Nick, there's no need for folders. You only have 22 notes. You are correct. But let's pretend that this is going to expand. This is just a tiny example, but let's pretend we're dealing with 200 or 2,000. With that in mind, we're going to go through 3 different examples of how we might organize these 22 notes. The first one is going to be our random attempts together. I hope you lean into this next vault and really think, how would I organize these 22 different notes? So we'll do the random attempts, then we'll look at 2 of the most popular systems out there, the Para method and the ACE framework. So without further ado, let's go into the random attempts. And I'm using a nice colorful theme. And if you're curious about this theme, go ahead and click here, open it in a new tab, and then later go through that process to install this custom theme in your own Obsidian. I'm calling it soft paper. I really love it. But now what it allows us to do is differentiate between the colorful folders and those 22 notes below. Okay, so first of all, what about book highlights? If you're watching this, you're probably somebody who reads books every now and then, and you might highlight or underline or write something in the marginalia. Well, in this case, where do those type of book notes go? We might call them source notes or something. And here, highlights from a book I was reading. So let's go ahead and throw highlights from a book I was reading into source notes. But what about idea and knowledge notes? This is one of the trickiest places, and I ask you to think, how are you currently solving this? Some people have a folder called Atomic Notes, and they put all these tiny notes into this folder. That doesn't always work for me because I have notes, they might be small, and they're about an idea, but I also have very long notes, and they're also just about an idea. So Atomic Note isn't quite accurate for my purposes. Then you have evergreen notes. This is a type of mature note with a lot of links in it. We won't go into the details now. We have a folder for ideas, one for knowledge, one for thoughts, and this weird sounding one called umami, which is that sort of hard to describe taste. That's not quite bitter, it's not quite sour, it's not quite salty, it's not quite sweet. What is it? It's umami. Well, where can we put our ideas? So let's look at some of these notes below. Important concept 1. Let's look at this. This is about yin and yang. Where would you put yin and yang? We could look at it. Maybe the best spot for yin and yang would be atomic notes. So let's put it there. And what about this other one? We have upstream, downstream effects. So that's sort of an idea. I'll put it in ideas. But isn't yin and yang an idea? Maybe I should put that in idea. But they're both sort of short notes. So maybe I should put them both. Can you see what's happening here? This is what happens when we try to folderize idea and knowledge notes. There's no easy way to do it, and this is the best example of where a folder title has to match the type of note it is, and this is a fantastic example. No one talks about this, but this is where you want a folder title to be as fuzzy as the type of stuff that it holds on to. Now, if we're dealing with projects, we can have a folder title called projects. If we're dealing with efforts, that folder title is called efforts. But when we're dealing with ideas and knowledge, it's so fuzzy and ambiguous, it can fall under all sorts of categorizations. I'm going to argue that you want a folder that is equally fuzzy. And that's why umami is not so bad. Now later on, once we get to the ACE framework, you'll see what I personally use, but that doesn't mean you have to use it. All we're trying to do right now is identify the type of notes that we have below and where they might go above. Now we're not going to organize all of these notes right now. We're going to do that once we get into the para method and the ACE framework. But instead, we're going to look at what's needed. And the next thing that you might need are notes on productivity. These are efforts and projects that you might have. So it looks like I have some notes on a project that's due next month. And I'll just throw those in efforts and projects. That makes sense, right? And I could keep going. I could find this project that's due next month. And I'll go ahead and throw it in here as well. So those are productivity-based notes, action-oriented notes. Do you need that in what you're doing? That's the question. You might not. Let's go to the next one. What about study notes? Maybe you call them course notes. Maybe it's a folder called learning. Maybe it's a folder called training. And that's where you could think, that's where I'll put World History 101, this course I'm taking. For now, let's just pretend it goes into course notes. Again, as you study things, as you are learning from different online courses or online individuals or articles or just people you encounter, where do those notes go? Think about that. Do you have a spot for those notes? Okay. And then last, what about time-bound notes? More and more these days, in the digital age of linked notes, individuals are finding the need to have a daily note. So if you have daily notes, like we have a few daily notes here, well then it makes a lot of sense to put them in a folder called daily notes, or maybe it's called calendar or chronology or journal or something that's more time-bound. At this point, you should be thinking, those notes don't apply to me. I don't take those types of notes. Well, guess what? You don't need that type of folder. But if you say to yourself, but those notes do apply to me, well, guess what? You need to figure out a folder that does work for that, and that is easy to maintain and especially allows you to just close the sidebar and move on with linking your thinking, with writing, with making connections and insights of your own. Okay, now we get to transition to the next two vaults. This is going to look at how the para method and the ACE framework can both organize these same exact 22 notes. Are you ready? Let's hop in. Oh, hey, and by the way, if you don't just want to follow along with what I'm doing, but you actually want to be hands-on, figuring this out on your own, I'm actually going to provide Note System 22 and this Note System 75 different notes, all sorts of different varieties of notes, and allow you to use it as a sandbox to see how might you organize that with your own customized version of folders, and throw in your own notes too, because you might be doing something a little bit different than the notes that are already provided. So if you'd like to download both Note System 22 and Note System 75, the link is in the description below. Good luck to you. And if you do it, if you actually organize, email me. Send me a screenshot of what you did. I'm intensely curious. So if you don't want to start from scratch, we can look at the two most popular folder frameworks out there, which is the para method and the ACE framework. What we've done so far is we've started from scratch with 0 added notes. We went from 2 notes that we added to 22 notes. And that's a pretty good number for us to start to think about how might we organize them with folders, especially when 22 becomes 2022. Will we have a system that works for us? So without further ado, let's jump into how we would organize this using Tiago Forte's para method. So for those of you who don't know, that stands for projects, areas, resources, and archives. So I've put a little number so they sort properly. Now let's just go for it. A cool concept I heard. I'll put that in resources, a list of virtues I want to live by. Also resources, a private journal entry. I'm going to hold off. A project due next month. Let's put that into projects so you can see that they're starting to go into the proper folders. What else? Calculus 101. That could be resources, areas, or let me just go areas to keep us moving along. You could argue that they would go into one of the other ones. Daily notes, I'm not quite sure. Let's go simmering effort. An effort similar to project, we can put it in projects. Grocery list, I'm a little not sure on that one initially. Let's go resources. Yeah. A quote from Dalai Lama, resources. Highlights from a book I was reading, resources, important concepts. Let's go resources. Let me collapse resources so we can see the other ones. Notes I have for a project due next month, and it looks like I have a few of those. So let's go ahead and throw that into projects. World history notes. Again, we could argue with where those would go. So just for speed, we'll put them in areas as well. Let me collapse areas. Okay, so now we're left with a private journal and daily notes. And I don't know where I would put these. I would probably create a new folder called calendar and throw anything time-based in there. Maybe the people who are watching this who use Para, please let me know, how do you handle time-based notes, daily notes? Like, where do you put those in the Para method, or do you end up adding another folder? Very curious, just let me know in the comments below. Okay, so that's what the Para method looks like. The next one that we're going to go into is the ACE framework, and we'll see how it does solve for calendar, and we'll see how it does with the other 22 notes. So without further ado, let's jump into ACE. So ACE stands for Atlas, Calendar, and Efforts, where we can organize through our 3 headspaces that we're most often in. One that's about thinking, ideas, and knowledge, another one that's kind of about time-based things, and another that's about action-based things. So let's see how this framework does. So a cool concept I heard while watching something. Well, that sort of idea, knowledge stuff goes into Atlas. A list of virtues, Atlas. Private journal entry, calendar. Now we have a spot for that. Project due next month, efforts. A quote from the Dalai Lama, Atlas. Simmering effort, efforts. Calculus. So these sort of notes I would still throw into Atlas, but you could make the argument that they're part of an effort with an outcome, like pass the semester's final test. But for now, let's just throw them into Atlas. Daily notes, the great news about the daily notes, we'll touch on at the very end. Grocery list, yeah, let's do Atlas. Highlights from book I was reading, Atlas. Important concepts, Atlas. Notes I have for the project that's due soon, that's definitely efforts. So now we see efforts is filling up. World history, we're also going to throw those into Atlas. So we can see that Atlas is a bit longer. We can close that. Calendar, okay, efforts you can see is the same length as projects was. Calendar though, now we have a space for daily notes. And what I like about ACE personally is that I don't need many folders. I don't need to be thinking about folders, but I know where everything goes, and then I can go ahead and collapse the sidebar. So that's the beauty of ACE. But again, I'm not recommending ACE for you, but I want you to think about those 3 headspaces and how they apply for what you're doing. Are you using your note system for ideas only? Maybe you only need the Atlas. Are you also taking daily notes? Well, then you need a place to put those daily notes. And that might be all you need. But if you're somebody who's also using your note system to manage your efforts, your actions, and your projects, then you might want to spin up a folder like efforts. And you might notice that the ACE framework has 2 other folders. This is an inbox. We call it the add folder, where any new notes immediately go. And we have the X, that's the extra folder, where any sort of templates or images or PDFs or extras like that are usually not normal notes, that stuff can go into extras. So there you go. That is what the ACE framework looks like. How does that apply for what you're trying to accomplish? And you might notice though, there's one more vault to look like. Now there's not 22 notes, there's 75 notes. I'm just going to open it up and then give you something that you can play with yourself. So first, let's check out this vault. So now that we're at 75 notes, we have more types of notes, not just the notes themselves, but we have notes about notes. Notice something else. We also have a few images in here. So how are you going to organize images when they come in? That's another question you'll be able to answer on your own when you check out what we've provided for you in the links below. So we've covered a lot of ground so far. Now I want to show you what I personally do, but before I do, I want to show you how you can get started with one of these folder frameworks, which is the ACE framework. So we actually provide in the link below a completely free vault called Ideaverse for Obsidian. This is the pro version of that vault, but what you can see here is that we have the same ACE framework that we just talked about. So this is completely free. It's a sandbox for you to play in to see what works for you. And in this particular sandbox, there are around 500 notes and files for you to figure out what's going to work for you. Consider this a separate sandbox for you to just move around and play in. Now, I'm such a believer, let me just zoom in a little bit. I'm such a believer in these three headspaces, Atlas, Calendar, and Efforts, that's exactly what I use across the board. So if I open up my Finder window, you can see Atlas, Calendar, and Efforts. Let's close that. And I want to show you my personal and customized Ideaverse, where I have, I think, over like 7,000 notes now. But what you'll see is I've flattened the structure of Atlas, so I have more folders, and I'm encouraging absolutely nobody to do this, but I like it, and I made it my own. I followed the advice of this video, and I worked from the bottom up over time, over years, and came to this formula for me. This is going to be too much for 99% of the people on this call. You need something simple, and you have to start from the bottom up. But as you do, you can see what makes you feel good, what feels right. So essentially what I did is I figured out that all those knowledge-y bits and idea bits and thought bits I can have as part of my Atlas. And they really only fall under 3 different categories. Dots. Dots is the great catch-all folder. Do you like atomic notes? Do you like evergreen notes? All those notes go into dots. I don't even have to think about what they are, what they categorize under. It's just dots. They're just little dots in the sky that I need to connect. And when I connect them, I'm linking my thinking. That's where the magic happens. Now, as you have a bunch of notes, that's content. Now we need a place for all those maps that map out the content we have in our systems. So I have a folder on maps. And then last, there are works. I like to think of these as works in progress. These are things I'm working towards. They're not really an idea note or a knowledge note, and they're not really a map. They're something with an intention of sharing. So those are the only 3 Atlas folders I need at the high level, but I love to see them at a glance and know that they're always here, just to toggle away and I can see these folders. Something else I did. Sources used to be an Atlas, but I took it out to recognize that it is part of this incoming stuff. So along with having an add folder for all the new notes I'm creating, I also want a sources folder for all the new sources that I'm capturing and adding to my note system. So that's at the top, and then we get to calendar. My calendar notes go here. So if I toggle calendar notes, I'm going to be able to see all of my daily notes in reverse chronological order. So the newest are going to sort on top. And boy, do I love this. And all the previous years are just tucked away in a subfolder called years. Now, something else that's really important to me is having those deeper reflections, like figuring out where I am in life. It's very easy to get lost. So reflections, planning, end of year reviews, all of that stuff. I want to make sure that I can see those notes, those deeply personal and meaningful notes at any time, so I can find more direction in my life. And to me, there's no better name for something that helps you find direction than a compass. So here we have calendar, compass, and you can see I have a bunch of different notes in here. Next, let's go to efforts. So these things that we want to do or actions we want to take, projects that we have, I call these efforts. And there are 4 levels of intensity: efforts that are turned on, efforts that are ongoing, efforts that are simmering, and efforts that are sleeping. If you want to learn more about efforts and how they beat projects when it comes to working with ideas, go ahead and click on this video, open it in a new tab. In the meantime, we're going to look at effort notes. So while efforts is only including all the efforts that I'm currently working on, effort notes has all those random notes. Make sure to do this. Have you thought about this? How it could relate to that and how that could potentially be an important part of your effort. So all the related effort notes I've actually pulled out into their own folder at the base level. Now you don't have to do this. If you want to use efforts, you can simply tuck these effort notes inside of the efforts folder. But this is my personal folder system. And last, you can see X for extras. So images, notes about notes, PDFs, different prompts, scripts, all the templates, and different vaults that I've added. And even further, my most important notes, a quick link to the note that has all my maps, and a quick home note for me as well. all there. Now let us zoom out and look at all the different vaults that we covered. Can you believe where we started with no notes added and where we ended with this wacky vault of almost 7,000 notes and all sorts of colors and folders and all sorts of nonsense? If I can say it as loudly as possible, and for the people who comment meanly about having too many folders, don't copy me just because I'm doing it. I built from the bottom up to get to this point. What you should do is start with no folders at all, work from the bottom up and find your own way. And if you want some help, or if you at least want a little bit of a framework, try out the Para method or try out the ACE framework, and that's going to get you half of the way there. But then recognize the folders you are not using and make the system your own. That's why the best thing you can possibly do is start with no folders at all and then just work from the bottom up. Now again, I don't like to spend time on folders, but when I do, I like to go all in. But seriously, this is a good opportunity for you to really think about folders with a new lens, with a fresh perspective, to see how they work for you. This video is about removing all the confusion around folders, all the unknowns, so we can finally get to clarity. So you can be really confident with why you want to create a new folder or a subfolder or 10. You'll know why you're doing that. Eliminate the confusion, increase the clarity. Now this video guide should get you to something that works for you, but please keep in mind our needs are constantly changing. We're constantly changing, so your folders can change here and there as you move on with life. Just be open to that. This isn't set in stone. It never is, but hopefully, again, we've been able to remove confusion and replace it with clarity and confidence when it comes to how we want to approach folders. And this version of me, I'm not going anywhere. This video is available to you, and I encourage you to revisit it 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and use it as a cornerstone, something that you're familiar with, but now you're a new person, and combine those two things and use that to evolve your folder needs as you evolve in life. Now, something else crucial that I must mention: time spent organizing folders is time not spent on linking your thinking. Time not spent on making amazing connections between ideas, making relationships between domains and fields that no one else has yet done, or that no one else has put together in this unique formula or combination. That's where the magic is. That's where the meaning comes from. And that's how we create value for ourselves, but also for others. So even though this video is all about folders, remember, we need to close that folder sidebar anyways to focus on the notes, the words, the ideas, and the links. So this is the only way to organize your folders in Obsidian. But this isn't the way if it's not your way. It has to be your way. And I hope this video helped you get a little bit closer to finding your way. Hey, and by the way, if you're new here, my name is Nick Milo, and this is my channel, Linking Your Thinking, where we talk about the how and why of making meaningful notes. If you haven't already, it would mean a lot to me if you could go ahead and like this video, and even maybe subscribe if you're getting value out of it. It goes a long way to making this video discoverable to people like you and me who might just be one step behind, or maybe just haven't found it yet. And you can be the person that helps them find this video and maybe finally solve the folder problem for themselves. All you have to do is like, and if you really like to, you can even subscribe. Okay, we need to close that left-hand sidebar and move on from folders. And this next video is the exact way to make sure you do. We're going to eliminate distractions in Obsidian and get your best work done. I'll see you there now.